Hello and welcome to Extra Hours. Here we are for another exciting episode. It is a special day. It's the Apple announcement day. So if you want to know a little bit more about how all this works and how you've stumbled across this, officehours.global is how you're going to find out everything about what we do. We've got a daily show and we've got this weekly show as well. So we've made this dedicated to the Apple announcement. I think there's enough to talk about. There always is. And so that's what we're going to have a look at today. I did a rookie mistake. I had the live stream playing in the background. And so instead of just trying to hide that, I just exposed my inadequacies there and showed how I had my live stream going and I could hear myself talking. So what we've assembled the United Nations of our panel tonight. We've got people from a few different countries. So I'm sitting down in Adelaide, South Australia, and then we go over to San Francisco, the closest to the mothership is Chris Fenwick, so close to it. Hello, Chris.
Yes, it's so close. I absolutely forgot that this announcement was happening today.
Okay.
It was about halfway through it. It's like, oh, I should probably watch this.
Chris, I'm just giving you a warning. You need to be on your best behavior tonight. You need to try to not be a curmudgeon. And we're going to, because I want to pull on your experience. You've been using oh, no, he's packing up. He's going home. I want to pull on your experience. You've worked on Apple events. You've used Apple products for many years. You haven't worked on Apple events?
No, the Apple events team. I've been to a lot of Apple stores.
Is that right, Moyano?
Yeah, Moyano. That's right.
Moyano. There we go. So Marcelo is originally from Argentina, but is in New Jersey, and is a co-founder of Stream Voodoo, which is an exciting app for live streaming, and we're particularly interested in it because of the ability to live stream in spatial through to the Apple Vision Pro, something that we didn't hear anything about today, but that's okay. But it's good to have you with us, Marcelo. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Grant. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And then we go across to London, where we have Alex Golner. Alex, I'm disappointed that I can't see the red buses professional experience, because you've got lots of motion graphics and all that sort of stuff too, right, in there?
Yes, I mean, I've been using Mac since before you were born, young whippersnapper. Well, since at least 1984, so it's quite a long time.
I was 4.
So then introduced desktop publishing bureaus to London. I kind of set up the first one. And then I've more recently been doing motion graphics, and more recently channel branding using motion graphics, using Motion for the BBC and also After Effects for the BBC.
There you go. You're kind of an Apple fan along those lines, right? You must have stayed impressed with Lisa enough to hang around. So there you go. We've got some good experience there. And then across to Austria, we have Oliver Breidenbach. I think I said that right.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to have you with us, also in the middle of the night.
Yes, and that's also slowing down my brain a little bit. But Alex, I can up you one more because I'm an Apple user since 1976. So,
wow.
Try to beat that, young man.
Was that in a wooden box?
Yeah, no, it wasn't in a box at all. It was just the plain PCB, and you had to wire up your keyboard and your monitor yourself. So yeah, that was quite an adventure. I was a little kid then, but you know.
Fair enough.
So I didn't do the wiring, but I got to play around with the computer.
And so you're a developer of Mimo Live, or you're kind of the what do you say, a lead developer? How you've got a team of people? How does that work?
Yeah, we got a team of developers, of course, because we couldn't handle it all ourselves. So we do have a couple of products on the Mac platform, on the iPhone, on the iPad, Apple TV, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I will be happy to share any perspective on the announcements from that side of things.
That's great. That's really good. And then last but certainly not least, coming from, speaking of the 1970s, we've got a phoner on the line because we couldn't get enough
Hello?
internet.
Hello? Can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Hello?
Alex Lindsay is somewhere. He found the only spot in Dallas that has no internet.
I cannot. I have two phones. I have Verizon, AT&T, and the Wi-Fi, and all of them, together, I don't think get over 2 megs a second. If I bonded them, I would get 2 megs a second. I don't know how I achieve this, but obviously this is not an area in general that I will come back to because I measure all communities by their internet.
Yes.
So
yeah, absolutely. And so your what gives you the perspective
on which I will not be on tomorrow to talk about because I have no bandwidth, and I also am in a production right now. That's why I'm here. So I obviously I started MacBreak, and my first Apple product was an Apple IIe in 82. So that was my entry point into the Apple ecosystem.
Very nice. My first Apple device was a PowerBook G4 that I convinced my wife to buy for her uni work, and then I used it mostly. But on that one, I tried to play, Alex, one of your MacBreak Weekly in 1080, and it wouldn't keep the frame rate up. It was struggling to play it.
People are like, what is he doing? Like, this is, you got to get. I was doing 1080, I think, in 2005 or 2006. I decided I wanted to do a podcast in 1080p, and there was a lot of people that couldn't watch it.
But to be fair, you didn't really have great bandwidth back then, did you, Grant?
No, that's right. That had the modem. That had the modem in it. The dial-up modem was built in.
I remember when I was in Australia in like 03, and I remember talking to some kids there, and they said it was cheaper to go to the store and purchase Adobe Photoshop than it was to pay for the bandwidth to pirate it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that could be the case. All right. So this is not a history podcast, but it does give context of our panelists tonight, that we've been messing around with Apple products for some time. But if we were to look at the announcement, we had a nice little video that started as normal, and then we went to down in the middle there with the rainbow. Something I found. So what the way that this is going to work as we work through this is we will talk about the products, but we're all media enthusiasts and professionals in production of some description, and so there'll be some critiquing of the production level itself. Now, what I found is that Tim in this first part felt like he was shouting a little bit. Anyway, that was just my impression.
I felt that as well. It definitely sounded like there was a little extra energy there.
Unnecessary.
Yeah, and also he has this body movement where he's like almost about to jump with every sentence he starts. So it's like it's interesting.
Right.
What do you think about the production value? I mean, it's like this looks like it has a budget of comparable to a full feature movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that, but I think that it's very high. I mean, it is probably higher to do this video than almost anybody else in the business. I mean, Apple has, but the live streams were the live streams were expensive too. You know, like that, you know, when you do big stage events, there's weeks of rehearsals, and it's much different. It's much more stressful to produce an event that is truly live. And for a corporate client or a corporation like this, it is, you know, there's a lot of risk to something going wrong. And so as a result, there's backups to the backups. There's extra this and that, and they're rehearsing for weeks, and then there's, you know, rehearsals on stage for a week or two, you know, and there's tweaking, and, you know, it's a pretty expensive and very, very time consuming thing. And I think that even when you just look at the value of how much the C-suite has to do to get ready for this is so much smaller. And I think that that's the big argument against doing live events, is the amount of time a C-suite has to pay attention to what's going on. This is something they can practice, of course, but they don't have to practice to a level that they can do it live. You know, they're cutting, you know, like, and I still think that one of the biggest problems that Apple has with these are what I call the teleprompter pentameter. You know, there's Shakespeare has the iambic pentameter, and I don't know, Apple seems to have embraced it, where, you know, they're going to say each line and stop, and then they say another line and stop. And I think that I've now, once I've exposed that to people listening, like, just listen for it and you'll hear it the whole way through the show. They say a line and stop, and say a line and stop, and sometimes it feels like those lines should have been together. It's not, it just doesn't feel conversational. And I think that the video has done, the videos, I mean, it's the best product video, set of product videos you ever see. I mean, and I do want to say that it is it's amazing how well they've integrated the iPhone into the production. Like, you know, it's just, you don't really think of it. There are some shots that I feel are abnormally a little wide, that are probably a limitation of the phone. But outside of that, I just feel like I'm just, you know, the first one was okay, but it keeps getting better. Like, they're getting better at shooting you know, they're getting better at shooting these videos. You know, you do notice that everything's in focus because it's a much smaller frame that's there. But I think that they're still in this mode. They still have this, like, and I think that they're slowly moving away from it, but of having this mode of, we're on stage, even though we're all over the world, we're still kind of in a stage presence. And maybe that's more comfortable for the presenters to be in that, because it requires less nuance. But I think that I feel like the next step is to get rid of some of the screens and make it a little bit more intimate and close up. And, you know, right now it still is a little bit presenty, you know, when we know that they're not, you know, they're not on the stage anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I think I do. I miss something from the live on stage, and I guess I said it before. I think it's actually Jobs is who I miss, because there was just something amazing about hearing him present live, and then doing the demos live as well. Now, with this particular show, this announcement, I'm not sure that there would have been much to demo, really.
Well, and I also think that Jobs is why we do keynotes, you know, at this level. You know, I think that the keynotes were not very good before Jobs. There just weren't that many, because they weren't seen by as many people. They weren't being streamed, you know, and so they are much smaller. They were much less polished and everything else that, you know, and he's the one that really brought that to the level. And so everyone followed him. But the reality is almost nobody, you know, I think that Jensen does a pretty good job. And I think that Mark Benioff does an incredible job of presenting what they do. And I think it falls off really fast after that. You know, like, it's, you know, of people who can really present, you know, effectively. And I think, you know, Mark Benioff, I mean, you know, he is probably the smoothest and cleanest, and he talks about stuff that I don't really care about. But when I watch him as a presenter, we did work for that company for a decade, and I still barely understand, like, you know, what I would use out of it, you know. But I think that the presentation skills that they have are the best in the world.
I think it's interesting that what they're doing by making these, having the pentameter of the auto cue, is it makes it very clippable. It's like, okay, we've got a clip. This can be played in a TV show, any TV show in the world. So what they're doing is they're disintermediating the expert, because the expert can just say, and here's the clip, which means that Apple has total control of the message going out. So that's the cool thing about that. Yeah. Also, what I love the transitions in this show. They had a bit of a language of like, we're going to go from Apple campus to San Francisco and backwards and forwards, and that's quite fine. And sometimes they didn't do a complicated transition. One of my favorite transitions is when they transitioned from one woman speaker to another woman speaker, and they just dipped to black and came back up again. I thought, good, they weren't wedded to being stuck with this thing. I really thought it was great.
That might have been that might have been planned, and it might have been like, oh, that didn't work. I mean, that might have been like a dip to black could have been like, well, like that. We don't think that transition really turned out. You know, that could be what happened there as well.
But I think it's good that they actually just went with the dip to black transition, because that was actually okay, and it was didn't change anything, because that was only for the people who watched the full 100-minute show, which is not really relevant to most people who see in clips. It's a bit like the Olympics opening ceremony. It's not actually designed for most people to see all of it. It's designed so all those individual moments can be clipped and then shared and then used elsewhere.
I will say that the pentameter and the way that their speaking style makes it very easy to watch. I got back from the production I was on and didn't really have a lot of time, and I watched the whole thing at 2x. Like, so it was, you know, and I could totally understand everything that they said, you know, at that speed.
Grant, if you look at this shot that Grant is showing right now, I always have I with all these shots outside, I think you know, I have the feeling that they are not real. It's like the background, there's a in that shot there's like a flock of birds coming flying by. So I'm almost thinking that they're doing like a green screen thing with background. Because also, if you look at all the shots in outside, there's always like, as Alex said, there's always like the feeling of that there's a stage, and then there's a drop off, and then there's a background, and so it almost looks like they are not. I mean, it's a thing of, you know, if you do that in the park in San Francisco, you know, there might be people walking by and seeing this, and they see what's his name, Jeff Williams, talking there, and they just could just eavesdrop, and then all the secrets would go out. So I'm wondering if they do something, at least with some of the shots.
I would assume in a shot like this that they are all extras, and that they own that park for that day, you know, so that people aren't doing anything weird. They need all those people in the background to just be doing normal things. Don't do anything
but
weird.
I also think I'm sorry, I also think, like, if you see, I mean, I've been really into the Vision Pro lately and the environments a lot, and I don't know if you actually saw them, but once you see these environments, you can see that this reminds me some of that. Like, the compositions seems to be very similar, and you know, you have your close shot, like we were saying, you have, you know, the closer scenario, it's like the floor around you, then there's some stuff that is always closer to the camera, and then you have, of course, like a middle, and then a long shot and a background there, and everything was pretty much similar. So I'm like, this seems to be built like that. And of course, Apple has space in their campus, so they can do whatever. And then, you know, maybe screens.
Yeah, I think that shooting, I'd probably lean more towards that if they were shooting with film cameras. Shooting with the iPhone at 422, it would be very hard for them to key those successfully. Like, it would be, that would be, you know, like I think that the only reason that I mean, sometimes the lighting feels a little odd, and sometimes it does. Sometimes I go, well, is it? They may be doing it when they stand over the screens, or they may just be rotoing those. But I feel like the iPhone, you know, they're doing the whole production on an iPhone, and that definitely adds a challenge to those edges. Like I tend to be like, I don't even, I have to admit, I don't even try to key 422. like I don't, like, I'm just like, I can't, like, that's not
Right.
like, I'm, if I can't get a 444 or a raw signal on green screen, I don't really consider it a viable solution. Like, so, and I think that they're doing it at, at a very high resolution and in front of a lot of people. I just don't think that the reason I don't think that they're doing it is I just don't think I don't think that'd be viable at the level that they're doing it at.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
I wonder if the
Sorry.
feel is a bit like an Apple Vision Pro because they maybe practice and rehearsed and did things in a virtual studio and Apple Vision Pro and eventually they had that as a kind of video that they then recorded all rehearsals live and then they just recreated what they signed off because it really looks has that kind of looking around each virtual environment, and then that cut in is very similar to the distance one is able to get inside, as far as I know, inside Apple Vision Pro. So it looks like it's almost like they did it inside a volume, but with Apple Vision Pros, but holding iPhones to make sure they had the right lenses. Although I'm intrigued by the fact that the resolution is really high. It'd be nice if they had special firmware in the iPhones that did 6K. Would be quite nice because maybe they it was shot on iPhone but with 6K.
The whole frame.
I do think that there's the idea that they could shoot it in a volume. It feels more, unless it feels more likely than green screen. But the smaller chip makes the makes LEDs like a nightmare. Especially when you see them moving the camera, because the smaller chip is much more prone to moiré, than the larger chips. So I think, I think that it's, I do think that they're probably practical, and I think there's probably some effects, but to do that much of it, even when we talk about things being expensive, that's an enormous cost with probably a limited result, when you could just buy out the part.
Yeah, we shouldn't underestimate. You shouldn't underestimate Apple's ability to spend all the money and just buy a park or, the Palace of Fine Arts. But I will say, Oliver, to that point, there was the one shot where they were at the Palace of Fine Arts. It's an old building if you're local, where I thought, people could hear. I mean, there's some acoustic issues with that building as a shooting location, but they have all the money. They could just buy the park, and like Grant said, yeah, here it is. That's the Palace of Fine Arts. They can buy all the extras they need, and they can.
Well, and the extras are oftentimes other employees, because they're the ones that have a reason to not say anything.
Right.
So.
They've already signed their NDAs.
Well, and they're waiting for their stock. their stock to vest. So, you can say anything you want at Apple once. On
but
your
Alex,
last
could it be the case? Could it be the case that they will shot without the character, without the talent in front, and then they will shot again in another place with just the talent, and then mix those things?
Yeah. I just think that it's just easier from a practical perspective at this level of quality. It's just way easier to just shoot it practically. I just don't. Okay. I think that they would. I think that, and the problem is at the quality that they're trying to hit. I mean, a lot of times we see quality that's, kind of television quality or whatever. But when they're really doing. I mean, this is a super high end. Like if I'm sitting there going frame by frame and looking at the edges, trying to think about that, it's definitely not 422.
It just looks real to me. But
let's remember.
I get it.
Yeah, let's remember they put the big graphic up at the end that says, shot on iPhone. So for them to not use an iPhone, to say, shoot the backgrounds with an iPhone, but then shoot the foreground with another camera.
Well, no, I think they would not be able to do that. And that's why I think if they're shooting it all in camera in some way, shape, or form, I just think that it's really hard. I mean, obviously they didn't do the computer graphics in the iPhone, but I think that and by the way, the computer graphics are like, just the explanation animations, as someone who's had to build lots of those, it's just, so pretty to look at. It's just so well done, of all the explanation graphics. It's just, if you ever wanted to do that as a job, all you got to do is take some of those apart and just try to do one. just go try to do one like Apple's. It'll be depressing because it'll take you forever to do it if you're trying to learn, but they are some of them are incredibly complicated and just really, really well executed.
That's why Apple should actually release the source motion for Apple Motion files that it used to create all the graphics and make it available for people to edit
Like
them.
all of them.
I think-
Yeah, I'm sure. I think that they've already released all the ones that were used for this project. Sorry.
Yeah. But I think it's Cinema 4D.
Well, if they
use
say
Cinema 4D.
if they say it's shot on iPhone, it doesn't mean it's shot on a stock iPhone, right?
Oh no, I'm sure it's shot on a stock iPhone, but they're using cases. They're using a lot of back end. Although I thought was really interesting is some of the stuff they showed there when they were shooting the thing was a small rig. Like that was a small rig that it was in.
Yeah.
Which they've used other rigs. They've shown Tilta rigs being used. They've shown a lot of the there's a whole variety of them, and I was fascinated that I think it was and it might have been the director's choice in the weekend video. I think it was using a small rig, the one that I use. So I was like, hey, that's my rig.
Yeah, but they were using the 16 today, I think, for the entire thing. Right.
So I just like the idea of them saying, oh, we use an iPhone 16, but we're using code that allowed it to use much more of the 48 megapixel sensor at any frame rate we like, so 6K, so it can do what.
Yeah, of course, and that's
like.
actually, that's doable. You can take advantage of the cameras in that regard. So yeah.
Or they're saying they didn't say the model, so they're actually using the iPhone 20 is the one that they're using.
Yeah, right.
And it is 8K, and it's and then in all the shots that they show of the rig, they had to put the 16 back in there just to.
That's right. They don't say the number. They say shot on iPhone. Exactly. That's it. Yeah. Like which iPhone, we don't know. So.
No. So let's just cover off quickly that they're so the first thing, they spent 20 or so minutes just talking about that watch and the different watches. Same old. It's funny, isn't it? I think someone mentioned about protein in this announcement, and I think we've just gotten
I think it's the first. Was it the first question? I think.
Yeah.
That was Peter Rosato's question.
Thank you. Yeah, you could read that if you like, Chris.
Shall I?
You shall.
Our friend Peter Rosato from Las Vegas says, other than the phone updates, I found the protein content of the event on the light side. Am I alone in that thought?
Yeah. Lindsay?
Yeah, it was too long. Even at 2x, it was too long. Like I think that I really think that they should give themselves a budget of an hour and just like you got to fit everything into the hour, because I just didn't think, I felt like it didn't feel as disciplined as a lot of the last couple of years, over the last year and a half. I felt like they were getting more and more disciplined about just talking about really keeping it dense and having you get to see the products. And I think today we spread it out a little bit more. I also felt like it was a little jarring. Some of the videos, like I think the watch, when they announced the watch, there was like this crazy animation with this big sound, and then it cut back to Tim. And there was something about it going from that big to loop. We're out on the grass. I think that needs to find some better transition. Like a whip pan, or it goes out of that and floats down to them, or it finds some way to get there as opposed to just a cut, because it did feel a little jarring. But overall, I think they did wear it very well. But I do feel like I could go in there and cut a solid 20 or 30 minutes out of that pretty quickly, and no one would miss it.
Yeah, I do. I watched it on the Apple Vision Pro, and so it looked amazing, and then the sound, to your point, Alex, the Atmos sound just sounded amazing. Every time that those tracks came on and things, it was really impressive. But yeah, it was jarring where it sounded amazing. It felt like I was watching a really punchy, almost music video, and then it went back to a corporate video.
Right.
And so it was jarring all the time. Yeah, but the sound really was impressive. Golna?
I think the protein content is actually slightly better than you might actually realize if you take notes. So I would say that it's a pity the first thing they said about the Apple Watch Series 10 was it's almost 10% thinner. And you just go, I don't know if I'll be able to see almost 10% thinner. So why they led with that, I don't know. But to actually, because they're slightly messing with the Ultra, because it's got a bigger screen than the Ultra, which is quite strange. The taking 30 minutes to get to 80% charge is pretty cool, and have much longer, bigger batteries and stuff like that. And they said, celebrate the beauty of metal, which I thought was like a really funny quote. And I don't know if they really expected that to be clipped and used somewhere or something like that. And I like that watch face. The watch face you can see maybe on the screen there that maybe Grant can share, showing that kind of glinty watch face, and that when you turn it, it seems to glint as metal. And I kind of like the idea of that. It would be really nice if it actually knew where your eyes were, and then they actually move. It has a slight 3D effect. I don't know if you could find that part. That's a little bit earlier when they're showing that watch face in the kind of demo video. It kind of actually reminds me that it would be nice if you'd be able to get 3D effects by eye detection on the iPhone. We'll come back to that later. But I thought that the AirPods story was a bit kind of slightly muddled. I don't really remember much about the new one in particular. I mean, I've got one of the old ones that has a bra around it, and it doesn't seem to have that one with a bra. I can't remember what it's called, and it hasn't really seemed to have changed much. Apart got a new connector and also a bit of new software, but not much. They didn't seem to make much of it. But I think the hearing aid thing is huge news, because essentially Apple are disrupting $2,000, $4,000 devices with the device that only costs $300, and that actually is probably going to be the biggest news.
I was kind of skipping through that because I have to admit it was like, okay, AirPods. I feel like you buy AirPods when the battery dies. It's like, okay, it's time to get it. Whatever's new now. But I saw the quilt of the new. I saw it in the quilt, but I didn't see in the graphics quilt or whatever. But I didn't see exactly what made it hearing aid other than pass through.
Well, I mean, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm like the best new feature, and I wonder. I was taught that the old AirPods had the same thing. It's like the voice separation. And so that one of the problems with the existing AirPods is that if you're taking a call and you're in the kitchen, it's unbearable because all the background noise is just louder than the voice, right? And so I hope that they finally fix that, and so it's like an AI feature in the AirPods, which is pretty amazing, I think, for if you consider how big the processor is that's in there, and that's something worth considering an upgrade, I think, because that's if you're on Zoom calls or in my case Slack calls all day, that is a huge benefit.
But I think the interesting thing about treating the AirPods as a hearing aid and introducing the hearing aid aspect of it, they're all talking about pass-through and changing the response to external audio 48,000 times a second. It's really encouraging people to use AirPods as the audio version of Google Glass. So what they're really doing is setting up the fact that you are quite likely and expected to wear these things for 18 hours a day, or when you're just like I wear my glasses all the time, and eventually they can essentially do augmented reality, but just with audio. So I think it's a sneaky way of AVP, but just with audio only.
And the one that did the part that really did catch me as I was going by was when she was ordering the hot dog, which I know sounds like a really weird thing, but that is one of the problems with headsets is you're listening to the music and then you walk up to buy something or a cash register, you start talking to somebody. and you now have to figure out you have to stop it, or you have to figure out what to do. And what it was showing here was that it just automatically goes down. It realizes you're talking, so your music just kind of goes into the background, and you can talk to someone without taking them out. And to your point, I think that it does really set people up for, oh, I'm just going to put these in my ears and leave them in all day and charge them at night, you know. And I think that there is I mean, I think I remember dreaming that you could just have headphones in all the time when I was like at ILM, you know, 25 years ago. I was just like, wouldn't it be great if I could just walk around and then I can answer calls and I can do whatever I need to do, but otherwise I can just listen to music. And I think that it's getting very close, you know, and I do think that the separation is important. I'm not using AirPods on this show. I'm using the Shocks, you know, headset. And the reason I use it is because it's got a boom, and I think it sounds much better, and it gets rid of much more background noise than the AirPods. And so, you know, I think I'm probably less excited about the AirPods because I don't use them anymore. Like I have my Macs that I put on primarily when I'm watching with my Apple Vision Pro, but I don't interact with the AirPods anymore because they pick up too much stuff around me.
We've got a bit of a mismatch of different features across the AirPod line now, and so what you were talking about with it adapting is the adaptive mode, which is in the current AirPods Pro, the second generation, and actually they didn't announce new AirPods Pro. They just announced an upgrade, a firmware upgrade. And so what it sounds to me like is that they're doing the hearing test is really key. Doing a hearing test then creates a profile for it then to be used as hearing aids. And so then it would be interesting to see how it's determining from the hearing test and doing multiple tests. It's then saying that, you know, here's a segment of your hearing that is deficient, and is pushing that higher in an EQ. The adaptive, what I've found is actually I've got to say this story. I was loving the fact that you know, way back in the day, I got the iPhone 4, and 9 months into having that, I dropped it and smashed the screen. I took it back to the Apple store, and they swapped it over for free. That was back. You got to remember that it was the iPhone 4. So that doesn't happen anytime now. Even with Apple Care, you're still paying for the changes over. Anyway, I felt like those days were gone. With the AirPods Pro that I've had, the first generation, 4 times I've had them replaced from the crackling issue. And so I took them back in, and I just said, yeah, we're just going through the motions again to get them replaced. They give me the charging case. They don't change that over. They hand over the two new AirPods. But this particular Genius that I got, I just said to her, you know, I would love to just upgrade to the second generation if there was some way to do that rather than swapping them over. And she said, okay, well, let me see. I'll go do some tests. 10 minutes later, she comes back with a box of the new AirPods Pro and just hands them over. No, I didn't sign anything. I got a receipt at the same time to my phone, and it was like, here's $400 Australian dollars. Here's $400 product replaced with your 3-year-old AirPods Pro. And I walked out with brand new ones. And so from this announcement, I was particularly excited that they didn't announce a version 2, because my hunch was maybe she was giving them away because they were about to announce the new version anyway, and they had a surplus of them. That's not the case at all. I'm going to get an over-the-air a firmware upgrade on those, and I'll now get all the hearing tests and all of that. So that's
imagine the product margin on this, so they can just replace your first purchase 4 times and then give you a new one, and still,
right,
you know, still make a shitload of money. So it's like yeah. Yeah, what I find,
clean show.
the other thing I find interesting,
Oliver. Clean
Sorry?
show. Clean show.
Okay.
It is your second language, so I get it.
Yeah. So one of the things I found pretty interesting is that they now sell a software upgrade for the AirPods. So the difference for the I don't think they are hardware differences between those two models. It's just like the one has the feature enabled, the other one doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I think the
yeah.
array of microphones would be different in order to do the active cancellation. You don't think so? You think it'd be the same?
I think it makes more sense to just you know, if you consider the margin that they must have on these things, I think it just makes sense to just make more of the same thing than to try to design two different hardwares. But you know, this is just speculation. I mean, you know, someone has to take them apart and look at them. But I think my hunch is that they are pretty much the same thing, and just $50 upgrade for the feature.
Maybe so. Chris, we were talking about protein in this question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, the current iPod Pro, which is, I believe, what I have that I like so much, it does have some flavor of active noise cancellation. I'm sure it's different. But, you know, it also has a thing, Alex, Lindsay, that when you talk over it, it will like mix down what you're listening to. I find it unusable, but that might be just me because I tend to talk to myself a lot, so it keeps getting confused.
Well,
Yeah.
Sometimes the
I guess-
voices in my head get out of my head.
Well, and it may be in there. Again, I made a decision. Like I tested again the shocks against, and I realized I have a lot of headphones. I mean, I have a lot of headsets, and I use them all. They all are specialized. I mean, I think I'm like Paul Wallace with mics, you know, like with headsets. You know, I've got the shocks, and I've got a couple of pairs of those. I've got I use the ultimate ears for when I just want to listen to music and walk, but I don't want to talk to anyone because the mics are bad. The AirPods just kind of fell out because I was doing so much I think they're really good general AirPods. The AirPods are really good general headsets, but I am fine with carrying 5 or 6 of them in my bag. You know, like and little ones of, you know, and I put them on. I make a decision. Like I have these shocks. I have shocks swim is it what it open swim, and they're awesome because I can wear them and listen to music while I'm swimming, which I find
What?
doing laps. Yeah, you can, the Bluetooth doesn't work underwater, just in case you're wondering. But but you can set it into MP3 mode, and you can even change its EQ for swimming underwater when your head's underwater, and you can just listen to the tunes while you're doing laps. It's pretty awesome, and you can do all those settings in your iPhone. You know, there's an app for it. So
And can people understand you when you're talking underwater?
I don't. I'm just doing laps. I'm not doing. I'm not doing any. I'm constantly. You know, I'm trying to get back into shape, and so I have all these exercise regimes. So a lot of them are different headphones are definitely attached to the fact that I'm doing a 500 yards of 500 yards of swimming every day when I'm at home. So
That's cool.
I think one of the sorry, if you could, one more thing about AirPods. I think the one thing that they may add to a future version is a little light that's on it, like a tally light, to say I can hear you or I can't hear you. The equivalent of on the Apple Vision Pro, when you can't see the person's eyes, and that means they can't see out, which means it's the equivalent of I can't hear you. And once they add that, then they can be worn all the time, and that light will appear on all headsets, and that'll just be how we all live our lives, with devices which
it's
have
weird.
a light on, so we know if we
I
can
will
hear
admit,
people or not.
because the shocks, the OpenCom shocks are open ear. I find myself in conversations with somebody else and talking to people around me all the time, and I think it is confusing for people around you because you'll be talking to them and then they stop talking and you're now talking to the person you were talking to on the phone, and because it's because you hear everything the same, which is a fascinating behavior.
That is interesting about having some sort of indicator. I have found that even when I put it in transparency mode, and I've got both in, and I'm at a shop, or I'm, you know, I go to pay or something, I feel it just a little rude. You know, it just feels a little bit rude, even though I can hear perfectly. I might not even have any audio playing, and I've just got transparency mode. I can hear perfectly fine, arguably even better. But to the other person, it just looks like I don't care to listen
Well,
to
and
them.
I think to what Alex is pointing out too, if it becomes something where if Apple's building a norm that is that people are just wearing these all the time, and some people are using them as hearing aids, and some people are using them as music, I could see that that people will slowly stop assuming that you can't hear them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one other facet about talking about it as a hearing aid, and I could be wrong about this. I don't think so. At least in the United States, just in the last, I believe, year or two, the legal technical classification of what a hearing aid is has been changed to include devices that are not sold and set up by qualified audiologists.
And it's caused a huge
And-
explosion.
And that is it's made hearing aids, which were which are a medical device, become a consumer electronics device. And if indeed that's the case, and I don't know if this applies, there may be some health insurance possibilities. Like, who knows? You might be able to get Kaiser to buy your Apple AirPods.
Right.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned about FDA approval for the hearing aspect of it. They were still going through those motions, and I wonder if it's using the term hearing aids, it would be the issue there.
Well, no, it's not using the term. They actually could not call it a hearing aid,
Right?
Because that's like saying, you know, my New Balance tennis shoes are a pacemaker. No, they'll make you more healthy. And if you run in them, not just sitting on the shelf, but if you use them and do athletic things, you'll be more healthy and maybe your heart will run better, but it doesn't mean it's a pacemaker. So to be able to call it a hearing aid is a byproduct of laws changing in the last year or two, at least in the States.
Interesting. Yep. So one thing I found interesting too was the color, in that they changed to the Max. So we haven't spoken about the Max, but that's what the AirPods Max. Alex, you showed them before in the bra, as you called it. And they created a whole bunch of different colors, put USB-C on it, and quickly kind of said they're better, but didn't explain why. And it was really just like and so the interesting thing for me is that they, on the AirPods Pro, the new ones, they've specifically talked about it being lossless when connected to Vision Pro, that it's a lossless connection, which is interesting. They didn't say that about AirPods Max. And so that's what I was going to say to you before, Alex Lindsay, about the difference between using the new AirPods Pro versus the AirPods Max is that you would likely find higher fidelity in the AirPods Pro Generation 2 versus the Max, because of that technology. And I've also noted too that when you do have the microphone enabled on the AirPods Pro, that the bandwidth changes. And I've noticed that when I'm looking at it on Mac, and you hear it too, that the bandwidth of what you're hearing coming back, I think goes down to sort of 32K, or, you know, it drops down, versus when you have the microphone on. When you turn the microphone off, the bandwidth increases again, and you can do that in Zoom.
That's a feature of USB
Bluetooth.
Bluetooth, yeah. So
yeah.
Which you call a feature, some would call a limitation, but yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we've oh, Marcelo, did you want to add anything else on that?
It was just short, yeah. So the feature is called conversation awareness. You can set it up on your Mac. So if you have the pros and you go to the settings of the audio, then you can see it there. And then one of the things that I like that they are adding to this is the ability to do the shake like no and yes. And that's very, very useful. Like if you think about it for a second, it's very useful to see that you can actually reply to Siri with a yes or a no with just nodding your head. Those things are coming. And I think the AirPods Max, the new ones are also lossless. But the things like they didn't say anything about the Max at all. Like they just say, hey, there's new ones. And it sometimes happens then some of the features you need to discover them by yourself. But that's about it.
Well, and where I was going with the color too, they created all these colors for the Max, and there are no color differences for the AirPods Pro. And that's interesting to me. If you want to say they're hearing aids have gotten smaller and smaller and more inconspicuous, and yet when they were showing the video of the lady using them as hearing aids, they don't look like hearing aids. You know, they're huge and they're white. they're really
Right.
obvious.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people who are who don't want to get hearing aids, and I think just disguising your hearing aid as a AirPods is sort of a genius move there. So it might help a lot of people. So yeah.
True.
And also what I want
young
to
and
point
cool.
out is that they now try to, from the marketing perspective, they now try to add the AirPods to their health and fitness collection, right? So they have the watch, which is mostly focused on health and fitness, and now they're adding the AirPods. So that was quite interesting. Also for them in the marketing department, I noticed the reel at the end at the beginning of the show. There were a lot of real world testimonials for the use of iPhones, AirPods, and the Apple Watch, and that is this is a real contrast to if you look back to the keynote where they last talked about an iPad. I think I don't know if that was the Worldwide Developers Conference or before that, something in January probably, where they also talked about the Apple Vision Pro, and they had like these real world examples for the Apple Vision Pro, but they didn't have that for the iPad. The iPad had like made up artificial use cases and not personal, not personalized testimonials like all the products have now. So I found that a little insight into how well a product works if you have those real use cases.
The opening video that they had all different diversity of people, and they were making mention of how they called 911, or like there was a few references there to real life usage. So I was going to try to step through sequentially, but I think we're sort of jumping all over the place anyway, so we might as well just go from the questions that we have. I did want to mention too, Courtney said to Alex, you just invented a whole new category for Apple: underwater home pods for listening while spending time on the bottom of the pool.
Yeah. I'm underwater. I'm surprised at how well it works. Like I was just like because bone conduction, it's not, a headset, so it's and it actually sounds, what's funny is when you set it to EQ for swimming, it sounds better when your head is underwater than when it's up. It's a very odd. It sounds crystal clear, and then it sounds a little bit off because it's adjusted for it. It's crazy.
I wonder what all the whales are thinking when they're hearing all of that. All right, next question, Chris. What do we got there?
Our good friend Talalek asks, was there any update for 3D capturing in the iPhone 16?
Lindsay?
You can now do spatial photos, which was something that was really missing in the last one. Now all we need is some kind of viewer so that you could look at your spatial. Someone needs to build a new like Google Cardboard or whatever that you could throw on so that you could look at your images outside of the Apple Vision Pro. But being able to take spatial stills was something that a couple apps did, but Apple's now built it into the Photos app. Unfortunately, the spatial, well, currently at least, a lot of us thought we were going to get an upgrade to the resolution of the spatial video, and it looks like at least for the APIs or the ones that you can get, it hasn't changed.
So is it possible that the lenses have changed, right? Like as in
there's two sensors now. I mean, there's two 48 megapixel sensors, and so it could theoretically do it. And it could be something that they roll out like 3 months from now going, hey, here's 4K, so it's not that it can't be done, but right now it didn't out of the gate update from 1080p per eye to 4K per eye.
Yeah, okay. Golna?
But there is spatial audio recording that's slightly better. I imagine they implied it was better. I'm looking forward to seeing to what extent it's actually recording multiple channels. Would be very nice as well. I mean, the video recording is improved in lots of different ways, but for us especially, it would be Dolby Vision. And they actually found a way of talking about Dolby Vision trims by talking about each frame having its own grade, which is like,
yeah.
Find that line in there was like, oh, that's a real shocker.
Yeah.
But that was interesting. So yeah, no, but for spatial wise, no, it's quite surprising. So I would guess that would be a in-year update. It's like saying, because policy about 3 years ago was like, no, it's either going to be coming out in October, it's not going to happen in iOS. And now the policy seems to be, no, let's keep the story going. Let's keep on having updates every couple of months. There's a big release. So like in February, there's the emoji release, but now that's actually maybe obviously going to have a bit of Apple Intelligence, but also it may say now you've got 4K in spatial, especially if it takes off a little bit. If Final Cut has spatial editing or Resolve or other tools like iMovie is able to do spatial video editing, then maybe 4K will be a nice bump there at that point, or maybe along with iPad updates or stuff like that.
Now that's an interesting point because Carl mentioned one time, he was saying about how the iMovie really stays in lockstep with the features of the iPhone. And so when the iPhone was able to do Dolby Vision, then iMovie would also support Dolby Vision. And as they sort of add these features, then you could do the editing within iMovie. So if that was the case, then the companion app is iMovie that is able to do spatial editing. So still Final Cut have not yet released is that right? The spatial editing?
Yeah, so they've announced that Final Cut will be having it. And Final Cut and iMovie are the same app, but with different parts of the user interface turned on and off, and one is free and one is slightly less free, but it isn't a subscription-based app. So yes, it is. They've announced they're going to be doing spatial, but not immersive. They haven't announced immersive yet for Final Cut, but they have announced it for Blackmagic and for Compressor.
So Marcelo, as someone who's built apps specifically to be able to stream in spatial, what were your feelings as you were hearing the announcement?
I think it's great. I really like the idea that all the 16 lineup can do spatial now, which is something great, right? Like not just the pros, but the pros, Alex, Lindsay, we will do 4K per eye. I mean, ideally, Apple doesn't give us the APIs there to do that yet, but we can, and we will try that. So
you think that the sensors having it is enough for you guys to do it?
Yeah, exactly. That's why even Apple was surprised that we did it in the first place. And that's kind of like the idea here. So we will have 4K per eye. And what I really like is, like you said, the two main cameras that they have now are kind of like matching in a way, which is great because in terms of quality and low latency, not latency, but low light conditions, I think that's why their phone, the Pros, I know that Pros also always in the dark mode, but this part of the glowing time, I think it's low light performance would be great in these two
Right.
cameras, not only just the
So-
main one. That's
So are
the
you
beauty.
saying that the two cameras on the left are more matched, and so
Right.
yeah,
The Fusion one and the top one, which is
Yeah.
the ultra wide, right?
Mm.
So those two now are 48 megapixels, and when we can match those much better than the 15, we should see pretty great results. So we'll try that. Then, of course, we will see about the bandwidth. Sending 4K is not going to be the same as sending 1080, but yeah, we can do it. We managed megabits per second properly, so yeah, it will be fun to test and see. Can't wait. Can't wait.
So Stream Voodoo is going to stream up to 80 megabits or something. You're going to be pushing it out.
Well, we will see about the bit rates, but yeah, it's not maybe 80 megabits per second, but we will work out the bit rates when the time comes. Ideally,
Yeah.
right now we do up to 20. I guess we will duplicate that up to 40, but we will see and then do some tests. But yeah, it's exciting, and I also really like Alex about the microphones and the arrays of the spatial audio and the 16 Pros. You see that you can choose where the audio is coming from and instantly manipulate that. I think it's a great addition. I don't know how that works right in practical terms, but I saw the demo today. I'm like, okay, this is a great addition there. And the button for the camera, I think that we didn't talk about that yet, but that's not for the 3D capture especially, but all those functions in the camera and putting a button that is exclusive for the camera makes you feel like Apple is really caring about the camera, it makes sense, right? We also say that the iPhone is a camera that does other things. I agree with that. Alex says that all the time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think
but
it's
yeah, excited.
I would say that they say, of course, that the iPhone 16, both of them were planned as Apple Intelligence from the ground up, which obviously they weren't because they don't have time. They must have planned the iPhone 16 much long before the beginning of last year. So obviously this update was all about the cameras, and I would say it's a perfectly fine update even without any of the Apple Intelligence stuff. Even to the extent that I like the idea of that button being used for external follow focuses as well, or external devices, or you could do some very interesting things in terms of that kind of hardware. But I also like the bandwidth is high. Its bandwidth is high for video. Our Wi-Fi 7, and also the iPhone 16 Pro still has that 10 gigabits per second on the USB connector. It's a pity that hasn't moved down to the iPhone 16 itself, because obviously bandwidth and connectivity is important for video as well. But follow focus is what I was thinking.
Well, it is going to be a big deal for you too, Alex, because of you'll be upgrading from 11. Did you say?
Yeah. So I'm going for an iPhone 11 Pro, which I'm using to film this with. And it's costing to iPhone 11 Pro Max down to an iPhone 16 Pro, and it's costing me £200, $200 less for the same capacity. So it's actually costing me less, and I've had this phone for 5 years. So yeah, it's a big update.
Yeah, you're not going to know yourself. It's going to feel very different on that device. All right, next question.
The next question is from Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma City. Pedro says, I'm disappointed. No M4 Mac Mini. If it doesn't come with USB-A ports, will you consider buying the M2 Mac Mini Pro instead?
Yeah, no announcement around any of this. It was just simply the iPhone.
Also,
Lindsay?
no Apple branded hoverboard this
That's right.
round.
And the Apple car. The Apple
That's
car.
right. Yeah.
No car.
Alex, Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't care about the USB-A ports. They've gotten, I think Apple let it sit long enough that now it's just a nuisance. Like I find the A ports to be a nuisance. Like so that I still support those. Number two is that you wouldn't normally have the cadence. They wouldn't normally they really group these products. So the computer announcement will probably happen in October or November. The iPad announcements typically, unless there's something special, will happen in the spring. Pro stuff typically happens in June. And they rarely have other they rarely vary out of that cadence. So we would expect to see a Mac Mini in October, November, but not on this one. And I think I'm super excited about the new ones. If they turn out to be small, USB-C only, I think it's a pretty amazing deal. So I'm looking forward to them.
Yeah,
but
so one thing that's I agree with the end of probably mid to end of October timeframe. But one thing that's interesting is that they today released, at least I don't know if it's public, but it's like on the developer channel is like the macOS 15 final version, and so that is sort of ahead of schedule. If you go by previous years, and also I've looked at the Mac Mini. And the current design is actually, I was very surprised, but it's the first time they used that design is in 2010. So it's like 14 years old design. Slight variations, colors and things like that, and the layout of the ports in the back, but basically the form factor is the same since 2010.
I actually
and,
I actually found I was spelunking in my garage, and I found a first version Mac Mini. I was like, where did this come from? I just opened a box and there it was. So I'll bring it in. I'll try to bring it in for office hours next week so we can compare the two. So it'll be fun to compare all three of them.
Yeah. So I think it's up for an update, and
yeah, 100%.
And let's see what happens in October.
As John said in the chat, he was just saying that I'd get a dock to get USB-A, and that's what I was thinking. You'd if you needed USB-A for some things, then you'd have a little converter and or a dock that has all of those on it. And as Courtney's saying, most non-Apple wireless keyboards and mouses still come with a USB-A dongles. So that's true. Cool. Next question.
David Paskin from Miami, Florida says, I want an Apple Watch, but just can't justify the cost. You all have made me spend far more than an Apple Watch over the past few years, so convince me. Why do I need an Apple Watch?
Okay. Chris?
You don't, David.
Yeah.
Walk away.
You
Walk away
wouldn't
from the
convince-
table. No, I tell people this all the time, in all seriousness. A lot of times people try to invent a need. Well, let me tell you why I need this. And they're going to go through all this thing. I'm going to set up announcements, and when my render's done, my watch will buzz and I'll be able to be more efficient. Like, most of that stuff is just ridiculous. If you want the thing and it's not going to affect the way you and your family lives and you can afford it, go buy the thing. But don't don't put it on me to make up an excuse for you. That's not fair, David.
But I must say, if you have one, you won't want to miss it. So there's of course there's no pressing need for having one, but if you have one,
You like it.
it's surprisingly useful.
That's true.
Let me see your wrists, Oliver. Show me your wrists. Are you wearing one right now?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Marcelo?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I can tell you my reply or also my wife's reply. She uses this like all the time, and it's pretty amazing how the watch helps her on a daily basis with timers mostly, and many other things. And having the watch, and I think it's a great complement for the phone. That's why I think Apple groups these products today, right? Like you have a phone and the AirPods and the watch. It's because that relationship there is very well integrated. And I do believe that it's very useful to have it as an accessory to the phone when you are not able to even watch your phone for some particular reason. Like, when I go, let's say, to the pool and in the summer, I'm not going to go to the pool with my phone to the pool itself, but you will go with the watch. And if something happens there, you have your watch, and it's very, very useful to replace that in those situations, right? Even though, when you want to use them in different situations, like I have the Ultra in this case, and the battery lasts forever. That's very useful. I mean, I know that the battery on the phones are getting better every year, but having a watch that the battery will last forever, it's very useful. Actually, sometimes when I stream with Alex, it's funny because we were doing some stream, and then I put my phone to stream, and then I don't have my phone anymore, and I don't have access to it. And I get some messages, and I got them on my watch, and it was like a lifesaver that I could actually read them there on my watch because I couldn't have the phone with me. So those are the things that you don't think about, but it happens, and it really, really complements the phone a lot, and for my wife even much more on a daily basis. So
Yeah,
there you
and
go.
the fitness aspect is actually quite good. So
Oh
if
yeah,
you need
yeah,
to get into this, or you want to get into this, I mean, you know, Chris, of course, it's all like optional, and you don't have to have it, but if fitness is something you need to get into for some reason, or health, then this is a really cool thing, you know.
yeah. Yeah,
So what's
by the way, I track every day my walks, like every day 3 miles, and it tracks everything and automatically starts. So it's a very good fitness device, to be honest. And I think Apple really praises the watch with the 911 calls and checking your heartbeat, right, and all these things about your health. I think that that's a really important role, and you can see that Apple is very bold about those things every time that they start an event, especially today, like in this type of event with the watch and the phone. So yeah, that's it.
Lindsay?
You know, I think that for me, I use maybe 1/10 or 5% of what the watch is capable of, and I could never go to anything else. I couldn't use any other watch now, and I know that it can do all these crazy things, and I have the Ultra and the original one. I haven't. I think I did definitely slow down on upgrading after I bought an Ultra because I was like, that's a lot of money for a watch. But I'm on a show that talks about this kind of stuff, so I felt like I could do that. But the
Good excuse.
I do. It is my excuse. That's how I buy everything. You know, like I have a show, you know, and so anyway, but and I've never bought like this. I mean, the Ultra was the first one because it did have some stuff that I like to hike, and so some of the tracking stuff I've used in the past. The main thing though is as I think was alluded to earlier was the timer. I use I don't know how many times a day. Like just I got to time my wash. I got to time time this. I got to time that. I'm constantly using it. And then I use it for steps and fitness. I use it to look at my sleep schedule. I use it to check my heart rate. I use it for my swims. I use it for like I use it enough in all these little ways, but none of it like I look at all the cool features it has, and I use very very few of them. But it's so well designed and it's so well tied in, and I look at other options, and I'm like, I just don't think any of them are viable for me. So I do find it interesting. My son has I got him the least expensive one just so he could track steps and have a handful of things. So I got him one for that. It was pretty utilitarian. He also has my old the watch I had before the iPhone, which is a Citizen Nabahawk, which is still a pretty expensive watch. And he has he has that. And I find it funny. I'll look over and he's switched over to the Navahawk. Like he's like using the Navahawk instead of and it's because he's going out somewhere and he doesn't want to worry about the battery. So I think that's really interesting. Like he's like, well, that one doesn't, it never goes out. So if he goes camping or he goes out with his friends for the weekend or he goes somewhere, he switches watches because he doesn't have to worry about the battery. So I think that's still always that's the challenge for Apple is to solve that problem.
So
but Alex, don't you have a timer that's going to run out in about 95 seconds?
It is. Maybe we jump to the next question, and I can try to say something and then run off. I have to pick up a couple things for my production next, and I realized I was off by an hour, and I was like, oh, they close at 10, so I have to get over there quickly. So anyway,
I'm still rocking a Apple Watch 4, and so it's 6 years old. And the thing that has stopped me from upgrading so far is that they continue to do all the upgrades. The OS is still current, which is pretty amazing for Apple. that 6 years on, they're still pushing out the same OS on the watch. Now, there's lots of things that I'm missing out on, but they may not do the update on this latest OS, and that might push me over the edge. But David, I think the SE is worth looking at for $250. That's pretty good. And I like Kyle's comment was he uses it primarily to find his phone.
It is very useful for that.
All right, next question.
This is for Alex. Craig Kadoki says they mentioned with the 4K at 120 that you can interpolate it down to 24 frames per second. Alex, why don't you explain why that's a big deal?
No, what's funny is it's not very hard to interpolate down to 24 because it's evenly divisible. So if you look at the
Right.
little thing that they put in there, it says you can do 120, 60, 30, 24. Interpolation means we're throwing frames out. Like, we're not, I don't think that it's truly, now it could be the cool version of this would be to use the extra frames to build vectors to do motion blur. So what I'm going to guess is when you quote unquote interpolate from 120 to 24, 24 is going to look pretty framey, because it's just throwing a bunch of frames out between it. If they actually are doing it true optical flow, we do this. There's some different software that you can use for this, where we shoot at 120 and then we can rebuild the motion blur at 24. But that's using the extra frames that we're throwing away to develop motion blur vectors to rebuild the motion blur for every frame. So if Apple is doing that on the phone, wow, like that is a big deal. I don't know until we see it, but I don't think that they are. but if they did do that, that's like if you suddenly see that the motion blur is actually correct and they're not just throwing frames away, that would be amazing. And we just won't know until we're playing with it.
Marcelo?
Yeah, no, I cannot add much to what Alex Les says, but I believe 4K 120 just from a phone, it's pretty incredible. Like if you think about it. And then I'm wondering, like if they do what you can do in Final Cut, right, which is the optical flow after the fact, maybe that's a feature for maybe
And
a
to be
Blackmagic
clear,
app to use.
I don't think any software on its own does proper interpolation from 120 to 24 and rebuilds that motion blur. There are plugins
Right.
called Real Motion Blur from I don't know why I can't think of their name right now, but there are products that are designed for this, but it's not the optical flow that Final Cut or Resolve or any of them have. And you'll find that you can do it with I don't know how well it does. Topaz AI video may do it as well. I haven't tried that, but I don't think that's the but I think that it could be done, and it eventually could be done on the phone, but it would be quite a lift.
Yeah, it's great that we have access to 4K 120. That's all.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next question.
Oh, that's me. Pedro Gonzalez from Oklahoma City says, so is the camera improvements enough to upgrade from the 15 to the 16?
Mm-hmm. Chris, no.
No, look, I think if we listen carefully and we listen between the lines, you will find out that this is the best iPhone ever. They tend to say that quite often when they have a new one. It'll be the thinnest and the longest battery ever. Whether it's enough, I mean, it's a lot of money. I will tell you just personally, I purposely, and I still think, honestly, I still think it's a bit excessive financially. I skip generations. So I'm going to get a 16, but that's only because I'm currently on a 14. So I skip generations. And I will say, when the 15 came out and I had the 14, I was like, oh, but it does USB and those look really good. You're gonna forget about that stuff in a couple of weeks. Just get over yourself. And then when the 16 comes out, I get to go from the 15 to the 14 to the 16, which is not as cool as going from the 11 to the 16, as Alex Goldner's gonna do. You just save a lot of money. Just, I'll tell you, I'm at a point where I think about retirement more than anything else about now. So,
Oliver?
Yeah, so I was sort of thinking about needing to upgrade, more because of the Apple Intelligence stuff. But as you guys pointed out in the intro, it won't come to our part of the world soon, so I can postpone that upgrade for a while. I think the cameras, I mean, if you are into cameras and if you are into video and photos with the iPhone, you know, it probably is something you want to do. And as always, Chris, of course, you don't have to. You know, I'm on the iPhone 14. You will be surprised to hear I didn't do the upgrade to the 15. But when they announced Apple Intelligence, I was like, damn, I have to get an upgrade now because the 14 doesn't have Apple Intelligence. But even the 16 won't have Apple Intelligence for us mere Europeans. And so I'm gonna wait and see, you know, when that's gonna happen. Maybe I can skip the 16 as well.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm on the 14 as well, and I skip generations, and so I think I'm due for it, and I want to be able to do at least do some spatial videos, so it'll be good for that. But Marcelo?
Yeah, well, like Oliver says, right? If you are into cameras, I think that this is the first iPhone that comes with an exclusive button and these extra controls for the camera itself. So they're really putting into it this time. I want to feel that button and see how that looks and works. But to be honest, I think that this is kind of like one of the most impressive cameras that you will get, plus the other features. So if you are into shooting video and taking photos seriously and taking things to another level, I think it's justified to change. If you're coming from an older phone, then even better. Maybe the 15 to the 16 could not be that big of a change for you, but I think it is, right? Like if you, there was some detail that they show in the presentation today that it will be much easier now to take photos of the main cameras by yourself with the cameras themselves without the front-facing camera, but just using the other one because of this button. So anyway, there are many more use cases on the camera exactly for this particular phone. So that's my take.
Good. Next question.
Oliver, I think this might be for you. Douglas Carmichael wants to know, do you think we'll see the return of the Mimo Live reporter with the camera improvements on the 16?
Yeah, I dreaded this question because it's like, yeah, so to the Mimo Live Reporter app was sort of like the two things. One is a minimal version of Mimo Live on an iPhone. So you could, you know, take a video, overlay some graphics, and then stream it to YouTube or Facebook. And the other thing was that it was a client for our Mimo call feature. So because the built-in browsers didn't support WebRTC, we built our own app to support WebRTC client for Mimo call. And that is no longer a problem because you now can use the web client on the phone. So the usefulness to Mimo Live customers was greatly reduced. And I think, to be honest, the standalone features weren't that much of a killer feature for. So we didn't see a lot of adoption of that app, but you know, we're always looking at you know, if we should make a camera app, if there is, you know, something that the existing camera apps out there don't do for Mimo Live. One example is, for example, we have built in something that also transmits sensor data with the camera feed, so you can actually get the orientation of the camera and things like that, and movement and you know, acceleration and things like that in Mimo Live, so you could visualize that, but nobody's really using that. So I think it has the status of a fun pet project maybe, and there's more important things right now to do. So that's the short answer.
Fair enough. Next question.
First of all, I want to say hi to my friend Dave Hurley. Thanks for joining us. Kyle Hammond says from Chicago, what is the major difference between the Pro and the Pro Max?
Alex?
There are three major differences. The Max, the Pro Max is 6.9 inches, and the Pro is 6.3 inches. So they're both a little bigger, and one's a bit bigger than the other, but 6.6 inches bigger. And the 6 hours extra time watching video. So instead of 27 hours on the Pro, it's 33 hours watching video on the Pro Max. At last. And $200 costs $200 more. I don't happen to think that $200 is actually worth that difference. And so I'm going from 11 Pro Max to a 16 Pro because it's a little bit bigger. So it's quite nice, but not too much bigger. So I actually get all the power I need in a slightly smaller device that fits into less baggy shorts.
There's a few more pixels on it as well on the screen for the Max. I see that sort of 2622 versus 2868, extra couple of hundred pixels in the height of it, and then the width of it, 1206 compared to 1320, so another 120 pixels wider. So I don't know if that's equates to dollars, but there are a few more pixels jammed in there that it's seeing. So yeah, I just find it too big, and so I'll be happy just with the Pro, I think. Marcelo?
Yeah, on the 15, I try to go to the Pro only, and then I switch to the Max. When you get used to the screen real estate, it's really hard to come back. So I get the 15 to my wife. But anyway, that's the thing. So, she's used to get like smaller screens and she's fine. But in this case, I really like the size of the screen. I don't know. I just get better at text and things and the space and size of, especially when you're watching a video and you just swipe up and you just let the video go and then you're doing something else. I think that the bigger screen helps on that regard. But yeah, those are the major differences. Alex was pointed out the right thing. But yeah, it's a size thing. I think it's the most important. The cameras are exactly the same for both models. So
yeah, I switched to a Max version when the cameras were different. I don't know what version that was, maybe 11 Pro Max or something like that. So I switched because I wanted the bigger battery and the better cameras. But I switched back to the smaller one because it's more portable and it's not as clunky. And now that there's no difference between the cameras and just a little bit less battery life, I can live with that. And of course, the bigger screen, if there's some need for it, or if you want the bigger screen, then of course the Max is an option.
Marcelo, I think your point about a bigger screen, I was always using an iPad 11, a sort of 10, 11 inch, and I found the 13 too big. But as soon as I got used to it, now I can't go back. Like the 13 is what I use, all the time now. So you're making me think about whether I need to go to the Max. We'll see what happens. Next question.
I'm going to just say, I, for one, I'm a little annoyed that the Pro Max doesn't have a better camera than the 16, because I would like to have an actual justifiable reason for my arrogance and feeling of superiority. Anyway, Douglas Carmichael says, when do we think we'll see the 16 for sale via the U.S. carriers? I think they announced that, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. Wasn't it?
Like next Friday or something?
Yeah, I think pre-orders.
yeah,
Pre-orders Friday and then available
20th.
the 20th.
That's right.
That's
what
right.
they put on screen. Yeah.
Great.
And major carriers, so everybody comes in.
Next question.
Still want it to be better. TJ Worrell from Minneapolis says, was there any mention of upgraded LiDAR in the iPhone 16 Pro models?
Alex?
All
No.
right, that was a great show. Thanks for being here, everybody.
That's a good answer. Succinct. Marcelo?
Yeah. It's right, Alex. You're on point. Like there was no mention, but I think the fact that you can take spatial photos with this phone, and that has to do with the new LiDAR that is actually available to do that kind of thing. And that's I saw one of the comments here in this the group chat that we have here in the panel that they were thinking about, hey, the 15 Pro doesn't take spatial photos. It doesn't because of that. The LiDAR sensor should not be maybe the same. I may be mistaken. I'm not. I have to find out. But I think the 16 can take spatial photos because of that. There's a better LiDAR sensor there, I believe. And then the 15, you can take photos. But then if you go to the Vision Pro, then you can, the new versions of the Vision Pro, the new OS, you can swap photos and make them spatial just by
You can
running
convert them. Yeah.
Yeah, you
which
convert them like
seems to work
instantly.
very
So
well.
that's great. Oh, it's
Mhm.
incredible. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Alex?
I'm actually, of course, interested in how much more depth eventually iPhones will be able to record, because there are some very nice explorations in terms of very efficient encoding of video and stills using just 3 different channels in JPEG XL, which would include different depth. In other words, the alphas at different depths. So effectively, what you've really got is just 2 depths, 2 alpha channels for for cutting out stuff out and stuff behind things, and then at the distance. And people have found that actually works quite well for 3D depth perception, and it's a kind of 6 degrees of freedom, but not actually, but enough so that if you do this or do that, you actually get much better parallax and stuff like that. So I hope that Apple move on from stereo relatively soon, because they have to take the kit to do it, both for recording and also for displaying. So I think that maybe they'll move on to something approaching 6 degrees of freedom, hopefully relatively soon, just when everybody else is caught up with them. I think they'll probably have that in their back pocket, I hope.
That's really interesting, different approach with layers and being able to do the parallax by just moving the layers a little. You're not, it's fudging it, right? Because you're not technically seeing what is behind something else, but a little bit potentially with the 2 lenses. Obviously, the further you go back, the less less you have. But I've been surprised though with that, and I took I took a photo when I got the Vision Pro from my 14 from my phone in the Apple Store, and then I converted that to spatial on the Vision Pro, and the depth that I saw felt like many more layers. Like as I'm looking at it, it looked like many more, and going right back to the corner of the store, there was, and maybe that's just some trickery. That's me recreating it in my mind, in a sense that I'm seeing that depth. But
I do like the also. We haven't talked about AI very much, but I like the idea of giving a device a left and right eye, but then it does an interpolation between left and right, so that if I just do this by looking at my phone and doing that, then it actually does all the other positions in a kind of lenticular sort of way. It actually secretly is. Those are all fake, but they're good enough. So if you move your phone, you've actually got 3D. Because I do have I got this wonderful prototype device that I could be using with this. This is the iPhone. I've actually got the iPhone 17 here inside this cardboard here. It's a very simple screen.
Yeah. Wow.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, go, Marcelo.
Sorry. No, but it's great that you have that phone, Alex. But I'm thinking at the Apple Store, Grant, everything looks better. Like the lighting that they have there, everything is like crisp, right? Like you have great light. So any photo, any video you take, it's going to look insanely good. Just saying, but yeah.
That does help a lot. Yeah, good lighting in there. Nice work. We've got to the end of the questions. We normally do a little content recommendation. I didn't remind all the panelists of that. a particular a movie, a TV show you're watching, a song, something. You can have a little think of that. I'm watching Snowpiercer at the moment on Netflix and really enjoying it. And so I can recommend that that series. I do like when you get a series that's completed. You don't have to wait for it. It's all there. You can watch, all 4 series or whatever, and it's complete. Who else is ready? Alex, have you got something? Yep.
Yes, in celebration of the Creative Arts Emmys that were announced this weekend, something I saw a while ago, of course, is Ripley. And they won a Creative Arts Emmy for sound editing. And the sound in Ripley is absolutely amazing. I haven't heard it in spatial, but I go to from Italy a lot, and it's amazing how they make it so that it really sounds like you're in an apartment building, and they get the sound at different levels and different floors all around you. For like all it is just a studio set, but you really believe you can hear the apartment next door and the one that's a little further away, what's going down the street. It's amazing creation, and I'm looking forward to hearing that in full kind of spatial. And what if you actually watch the end credits of Ripley? And you hear some, footsteps and echoes and stuff like that. That's actually the sound effects from the first scene of the next episode. And
That's cool.
The sound is amazing, as well as and also they won for cinematography as well. So Ripley.
Good one. Chris?
I have been absolutely binging Bering Sea Gold. I've been watching it on Max. I think it was a Discovery show. It's about a bunch of people that dig up gold, or they suck gold off the sea of the Bering Sea with these dredges. Now, this sort of genre of like adventure entrepreneurial stuff, like the crab fishing guys and all that stuff, it's kind of a formula. You got a bunch of guys yelling at each other, and then they go and they have a big, they either catch the most crab or find the most gold. But I'll tell you, I think that basically everything you need to know about running a small business can be gleaned from these type of shows. I mean, if you break down, storylines about what goes wrong and how they either manage their personnel well or not, or they plan ahead or not, or they prepare for things to go wrong, it's interesting. It's also a lot of fun, but the justification is I think you can learn a lot about running a small business by watching these people either fail or succeed.
Very cool. Marcelo?
Yeah, well, I have a couple of things now that you mentioned. First, the Vision Pro, the new immersive content. I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl one. It's mind-blowing. Like, for those who have Vision Pro, just go and watch that. It's pretty amazing. And the Hawaii one, it's incredible. Like Elevated, I think it's called. It's amazing. It's really, really, really good. And I saw it the other day. I'm like, yeah, this is it. And then the second thing, of course, it's Linkin Park. They're back. I know. No, I don't know if anybody here is a fan of Linkin Park. I am. And but anyway, they're back and they have a new singer. So they're gonna be performing in New York. Actually, they're performing in LA, I think, and then New York on the 16th. And I have tickets, so I got tickets last night to go, and I'm gonna go.
Congratulations.
And but anyway, it's gonna be fun. And yeah, the last thing.
Can you stream that? Can you stream that in spatial for us?
I don't think so. And you know what? It's the 16, and I'm like, oh, the new phone coming on the 20th. So why didn't I just push the date for like the 22nd or something? Like, but anyway, it's gonna be fun. Linkin Park is like a very old school band, and anyway, but that's about it. And of course, yeah, Voodoo Spatial is out, but that's good. Like when the phone come out, like I'm waiting for the 16 to try it and see how that performs there. But yeah, if you want to do some spatial, it's very cool. It's very simple to use, so that's what I like about it.
It's gonna be fun. Oliver?
Oh, do I have to? So
have you got something?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just discovered some YouTube channel a couple of years ago, El Cordoba, and if you're into nerdy stuff, it's incredible, little videos that make fun of Star Wars, Star Trek, and the universe and things like that. ELLECA core, CO CORDOVA, I think.
Very cool. Well, thank you, everyone. A big thank you to Laura looking after the questions for us and making that work. And a huge, huge thank you to Jeff, 1F Jeff, who has just looked a little green the whole show, like he was about to throw up. He's just found it a little bit difficult to listen to the Apple fanboys go on and on about how all great it is. He's been yelling at the screen, talking about how PC and Android are way better, and anyway, you can have, you know what, Jeff, you can do your own show tomorrow, right? And you can talk all about it then. All right. Thank you for jumping in and making it all the streaming work and stuff, and using your environment. Very much appreciate that. And thanks to everyone that was watching and posted the questions. There's so much more that we could talk about, but it was a great panel to kick around this announcement. It'll be interesting to see how it flows on from here. So anyway, you can join office hours tomorrow at 7 a.m. Pacific, or you can catch us again next Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.